Hello, everybody. My name is Susan Bashinski, and I'd like to begin today by thanking each of you who've chosen to spend approximately an hour of your time with me going through this presentation on the development of the ability to use symbols for the purposes of communication. I think it's a super important topic for children and youth who experience deafblindness, and obviously you do too, or you wouldn't choose to spend your time this way. So thank you. I will also tell you that this recording is the second in a series of three that we've planned. Dr. McKittrick, the director of the Idaho Deafblind Project for children and youth who have deafblindness, and I have planned. The first one was about the basics of communication development, and I will make reference to a few of the communication reminders that I shared during that presentation. But I want to reassure you, if you haven't watched that, it's fine. You should be able to follow today's presentation with no problem. If you like something you hear today, maybe it'll make you want to go back and watch that other one, all right? And if you did view the first recording, thank you. And I think you'll hear me make reference to a few of those points as we go through today's information. So let's get started. I'll share my screen with you, and you'd rather look at the slides than look at me. So that is fine. Here we go. We will be talking for about an hour, maybe a little bit less, about developing a learner's skills for using symbols for the purposes of communication. It's important to begin by reviewing what you'll learn. I hope you'll learn more than these four things, but definitely we'll talk about these four things. We will talk about how critical it is that all the members of a learner's team, family and school, or family and preschool, family and work, will meet the learner together at the point where she is functioning in terms of communication ability. You'll learn about the different stages, the different levels, wherever that kiddo is. We need to meet her there. Much of this presentation will focus on the early end of that symbolization continuum, because the literature in the field of deafblindness is very clear that what families want the most, what educational teams struggle with the most, is building a system of communication for a learner with deafblindness. So we will heavily emphasize that end of the continuum, but we will talk about all the major stages. We will end today with a mini case study of a young man that I've known for many years, 16, 17, I don't know, who started at the end of the continuum where he used no symbols for communication, no. And over the course of time, he learned to use a lot of symbolic forms of communication and is now very symbolic in his understanding and his expression. And it just illustrates for you that kids with deafblindness, even with significant vision loss, significant hearing loss, can develop a system of communication. Secondly, we will talk about the key elements of the symbolization continuum, the different elements that make it up, the different words and terminologies we use to talk about the development of symbolic skill. We'll look at the process through which kids grow and learn, develop, expand these skills. And we will talk briefly about why it is so essential that all communication partners of a particular learner respond to her observable behaviors in a consistent way. This will be illustrated primarily in the case study, but I'll mention it as we go through. I hope it will call to mind one of the reminders I shared in the first webinar, that behavior is communication. If it's, quote, appropriate behavior, if it's super challenging, what people would say disruptive behavior, doesn't matter. Behavior is almost always communicative in value, and we have to take that behavior, assign meaning to it, assign intent to it. All partners need to respond to it in the same way, because it is through doing those things that we scaffold a system of communication for that learner. That's how we helped Lance, the young man you'll meet in the case study, and in a video before that, to be honest, develop his ability to use symbols very facilely. So the background. For learners, kids who are typically developing, they just learn these basic communication skills incidentally. That's a word from the first webinar. They learn by being alive. They watch their parents, they watch their siblings, they watch their peers in preschool or daycare. They listen, they learn. Well, kids with deaf blindness can't rely on those sources for all of their communication development because their vision isn't typical, their hearing isn't typical, and they don't process the information. They don't receive it the same way. They don't perceive it the same way. So it is not as a reliable, those aren't reliable sources to help their communication skills expand. And so they will have to be structured and taught by families and teams. We'll talk about communicative competence. That's just a child's ability to communicate in a way that other people familiar with her and unfamiliar with her understand. And that ability to communicate is anchored in that child's motor experiences, motor activities, social interactions and experiences, and the things she's learned cognitively during the very first few months of life. This is why early intervention, especially for learners who experience deaf blindness, is so critically important. The first few months of life are critical in terms of building sensory skill, motor skill, having social interaction. Now, true, many children with deaf blindness are born with medically fragile conditions. They spend time in NICUs. And at that point, we push motor aside, we push communication development aside. We're trying to keep the kid alive and keep the kid healthy. And I understand that. But as soon as we are able, I have been part of a team where a speech path and I went into a NICU and did some very basic work to lay a foundation for communication. It's certainly not the most important thing, but anything you can do, even with the way you handle a baby, touch a baby, talk to a baby in a NICU, it can begin to lay the foundation for social interaction and communicative competence. For those of you who've had ed psych courses as part of your college degree program, you might have studied Jean Piaget, and his theory is very much referenced as a solid description of these basic sensory motor experiences that happen between birth and 2 years of age. So if you want something else to look at, Piaget is a great source. Piaget does talk about sensory motor precursors, and I don't want anybody to get hung up on what's a precursor. Is that a prerequisite? And the clearest thing I can say is no. A precursor is not a prerequisite. These 5 skills, and there could be others, but these are the main ones I've chosen to share with you today. These skills develop right alongside these abilities to learn to use symbols for communication. So by working on object permanence, you go, what's that? Oh, well, that's the game that a parent pulls up a blanket in front of their face. And if the child starts crying, they think that dad's disappeared forever. But if when you pull the blanket up in front of your face, you, the parent, and you drop it and the child laughs because the child knows you're still there, that's a game. It's permanent. If a child has something on a wheelchair tray or a high chair tray and it falls on the ground and the child just cries, they might not have that skill. But if after it falls on the ground or the child knocks it on the ground, they look to the ground, they know it still exists, even if they can't see it. That is all part of what contributes to learning to use symbols for communication. Purposeful problem solving, that's if I can't reach something, I know if I get a yardstick or a stick or a cane or a something, I can knock it down to where I can reach it. Or if I can't reach something, I could get a chair and climb up on that chair. It's understanding things that aren't right here, right now with me, so I can figure out how to solve a problem by using a tool somehow. That contributes to using communication symbols. Cause and effect, I think everybody knows what that is. If I do this, then this thing will happen. Imitation. Parents play imitation games with kids all the time. If it's a matter of, I'll put my hand down, this is the adult, this is the child, okay? hand, 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 hand. You play that game. You imitate. If when your child makes goo, 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 you go back and you make goo, 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 or you might go goo, 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 to see if the child will go goo, goo, goo. Or you act silly and you act, if it's itsy bitsy spider went up the water spout, you do that gesture to see if kids will copy it. Those kinds of things all add to the ability to use communication in a symbolic way. Playing, pretend play, like a stuffed animal, putting socks on a stuffed animal, or feeding a dog a bottle. Those kinds of pretend play, those are all indicative that things are starting to happen and coming together so that that learner is ready and beginning to understand using symbols to communicate. So you can work on all these things at the same time as communication. So let's define a symbol. It's simply one thing stands for another thing. It could be a picture of a black kitten that stands for cat. It could be this sign that stands for cat. It could be the word CAT written on a blackboard or whiteboard or a bedroom wall. It could be spelling it in finger spelling or tactile spelling. Anything to learn that one of these ways stands for the family's black cat, all right? And these are two words. I try to not present too many terms that are really basic, but I think these two are. So we want to talk about the referent. In the story I just told about all these different ways to say cat or show cat or do whatever to indicate cat. Those all refer to the family's cat. So the cat is the referent. It's the object we're representing. The family's cat named Boots is what we're talking about. We're trying to represent when we spell cat, or we sign cat, or we say cat. That's the referent. The cat is the referent. The representation, that is whether we sign, finger spell, show a picture, say the word. That's the representation, because we're using abstract means to talk about the family's cat Boots. And representations and reference are different, but they are linked to each other. The representation is the symbol. The representation stands for the referent, okay? So back to Piaget, if you know about him, if you don't worry about it. The key is called representational thinking skills. It's the ability to represent something in your mind. And I know you say, don't use the word to define a term, but this is the key skill involved in using symbolic communication. And here's how we're going to define it. The ability to represent something in your mind when it is not in the space the learner is in, right here, and it's not when the learner is there right now, all right? So if I say to you, let's pretend you're not at home, or if you're at home, you're not in your kitchen, all right? And I could say, tell me what's in your kitchen sink. Well, you could do that. Even though you're not there in the kitchen, you're not in the space of your kitchen, you could tell me what's in your kitchen sink because you have this concept of distancing. You can remove yourself from the space you are and represent in your mind your kitchen sink and tell me what's there. The second aspect is now. If I said, okay, everybody, think about what you did, who you were with for the last winter holiday. And unless you're watching this on the day of Hanukkah or Kwanzaa or Christmas, which I hope you're not, you could think back where you were on that holiday last year and you could tell me about it. Because again, you can distance yourself from right here, right now, and figure it out in your mind. You could represent it in your mind. And it's by being able to do that kind of distancing and remove yourself from the space and remove yourself from the time right now that you begin to construct knowledge about objects and people and places. And that is the key to using symbols for communication. Because otherwise, if I do this, if you don't know manual sign language, you don't have a clue what I've just said. But if I say cat and you speak English, you do know, right? All right. Symbolization. I prefer, these are 4 words that if you are a professional and you read the professional literature, you might see the word pre-linguistic, non-linguistic, pre-symbolic, non-symbolic, all these different words. They all refer to the beginning stage in the development of symbolization, all right? They all do. And I've bolded this one and put an asterisk by it because it's my preference. Doesn't mean it's the only one that's right. But I like non-linguistic, I like non-symbolic, because if we use one of the other terms, pre, in my mind, that indicates that linguistic skills, symbolic skills will absolutely, definitely follow. And with many kids who experience deafblindness, those skills don't. There's a significant portion of learners who experience deafblindness that never advance to a fully symbolic stage of communication. Approximately 90%, some studies say 92, some say 89, but it's approximately 90% of learners who experience deafblindness experience an additional disability, one additional disability or more. Oftentimes it's a cognitive disability. That does not mean if your child has cognitive disability that your child will not develop symbolic skills. He really might, but it's okay if he doesn't, as long as we build a non-symbolic communication system for him. So if kids move beyond non-symbolic, fantastic, let's have a celebration. But if they don't, it's okay, because we're going to meet that learner where he is, and we're going to support the learning at that level. Different authors, university types, and I was one of them for a very long time. I was the university professor until 3 months ago. They talk, they're forced to do research, right? They're forced to write a bunch of stuff. And so different researchers, different authors will talk about different numbers of stages in the development of symbolization. Many of you will be familiar with the communication matrix. It's a fantastic tool developed by Charity Rowland and her colleagues. She talks about 7 stages. Lee and Jim McLean, very famous language researchers early in the time period when we began to research language and communication for learners with deafblindness, they talked about 3 or 6, more often 6 stages. Different people talk about different numbers. I talk about 3. I'm a big believer in that KISS principle. Keep it simple, stupid. Okay. And I'm not saying you're stupid. I'm saying I need to keep it simple for myself. So these are the 3 stages we'll discuss: non-symbolic, transitional, which is also called concrete symbolic, and then abstract symbolic, which is how you and I are communicating right now. You can remove yourself in space, you can remove yourself in time, you can use lots of abstract symbolic forms. You can read these words on your screen, you can understand the words I'm saying, you can interpret symbols, you're good to go. You are abstract symbolic. So here's the continuum. We're going to examine each of the 3 stages. In the non-symbolic stage, kids will very often, the majority of learners with deafblindness will use idiosyncratic communication signals, all right? Sometimes these are called potential communicative acts. They could be facial expressions, they could be sounds, they could be body movements, gestures, they could be all different kinds of things. I think I told the story in the first webinar. I went to a family's home and a kid was beating on the side of the TV and starting to get really exhibit problematic behavior. The sibling, the big brother, got up, grabbed the remote, changed the channel. The learner who experienced deafblindness completely calmed down and was satisfied. That's a very idiosyncratic gesture to say, would you please change the channel for me? Kids will do literally anything that works for them. They might always kick their left foot when somebody walks past their chair if they want somebody to talk to them. They might beat on their shoulder if they're feeling pain in their tummy. You just don't know. Idiosyncratic means it's something that is unique to that learner, and it sky's the limit. It really can be anything. This is behavior. Behavior is communication. You as a team have to figure it out. All right. It could be sounds. It's just, what I would say to those of you who are parents or you have babysat a lot with young babies. I don't know about you, but with me, when I first brought my first child home from the hospital, it was like, oh my gosh, she's crying and I don't know what it means. And within a very short period of time, you figure it out. This cry means I have a poopy diaper. This cry means I'm hungry. This cry means I want you to pick me up. This cry means play with me. This cry, da 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 da. Those different vocalizations. As parents, we naturally figure those things out so we don't lose our minds, right? But we figure them out. We have to figure them out for learners who experience deaf blindness. If it's the way they move their bodies, maybe it's stereotypy, the stereotypic movements and sounds, or these different combinations. You have to figure them out and organize them to prove to that learner that the world isn't totally chaotic. It's predictable. So with learners who are at this level, or primarily at this end of this continuum, and you'll note there aren't lines that go down and separate these, it's just a continuum. The responsibility for a successful interaction rests with the partner. The partner has to interpret things correctly. So it's like playing a game of 40 questions, 20 questions, 120 questions till you figure it out right. But once you've figured it out, you pass it along to everybody else in the family and on the team, so we don't have to play that game, and we all respond the same way. The context of the interaction is critical. Like I say, if a certain learner kicks her left foot out, only when you notice somebody walking past her chair, that context is everything, because that context means, hey, I see a person, I sense a person, I hear a person, come over here, right? And even a learner may demonstrate little overt behavior, very, very little overt behavior. I had a learner in my class, my third year of teaching, and that was a long time ago, folks. His name was David, and David would go, he had a lot of self-abusive behavior, and I was trying to figure out why he was doing that and what I could do to intervene to get him to stop. Fast forward, I watched him. He was an elementary age student, 9, I think. And when we would have recess, he would go out on the playground, which was grass, and he would stand next to a tree. The trunk was no bigger around than my arm. And he would just stand there. Didn't do much. And after a long time, I was really slow, I figured out he loved when those little leaves would brush his skin, brush his forehead, brush his skin. It was a baby tree. And that was my in. So I started setting up things in the classroom, that little fans, little streamers, little things that would try to replicate that kind of sensation to get him to quit hurting himself. And it worked. So even if you don't have much overt behavior, it's really, really important to capitalize on whatever kids do. So let's examine the middle stage, transitional, or what we call concrete symbolic. The vocalizations or gestures become more conventional. For example, this. In the American culture, this is a pretty conventional gesture, right? You say, what does it mean? Well, it could mean hello. It could mean goodbye. Context is still important, but it's more conventional. Or even if kids do that, it's more conventional than the way they might express hello or goodbye, because if they're saying goodbye to somebody they don't want to say goodbye, they might start screaming if they're not symbolic in their communication. So these vocalizations, even if kids don't say, yes, please, they might start going, yeah, yeah, for no. things start moving in the direction of conventionality. The partner is still important. The partner still shares some responsibility. Not nearly as much as with a learner's not symbolic, but this partner's still responsible, all right, for part of the success. We begin to see some concrete symbolic communication, and that's with three-dimensional objects. Kids will begin to maybe push a cup at you, or throw across the room something they don't want to eat or they don't like, or if there's something in their bowl that they really like and it gets empty, they may bang on the table, or they may bang the bowl on the table. They'll start to interact with three-dimensional objects in this stage. So let's look at symbolic, and this is when we get really conventional. So it's very important that I cite, for symbolic communication, we can't forget how important culture is. Communication and language are very intimately interwoven with culture, and what is conventional in our society and our culture is, you've heard adults say it, look at me when I'm talking to you. You've heard them say that to a child, right? And in some cultures, kids are not supposed to look at adults in the face, right? So it's what's conventional in expression, consistent with the culture and the spoken language. This is when communication can occur free of context. Doesn't matter. Today I said to you, what's in your kitchen sink? What'd you do last winter holiday? You could answer. We didn't need those contexts. You didn't need to be in your kitchen. You didn't need to be looking at the electronic pictures you took from last year's holiday. It's very abstract, and you can use two-dimensional representation, written words, braille, photographs, drawings, all of those things start working. There are three other elements of the symbolization continuum that are very important, and these are trends or generalizations. The importance of the context, and I've just used a neighborhood because I really didn't know how to depict context. It's super important at the non-symbolic stage, and as kids move down this continuum, it becomes much less important, or maybe not important at all. All right. Partner's role. The partner is super key, super important here, and as you move down the continuum, becomes less important. There must be a partner. If there's not a partner, there is no communication. But the partner can be unfamiliar. The partner can be anybody. I don't know who you are, and we're communicating with each other. And conventionality increases. Whatever those idiosyncratic behaviors are that the learner exhibits, they can get into ABC, 1, 2, 3, if it's ABC in sign, ABC in writing, ABC in speech. So these two become lesser important, but conventionality becomes much, much more expected. Hope that makes sense. So the sequence, as I said, those three categories of symbolization, they're not differentiated by distinct boundaries. That's why there's no lines going up and down vertically in those charts, all right? A shift from one level of development to the next doesn't occur overnight. It's not like a child and a young adult will go to bed with non-symbolic skills one night and wake up the next day and be symbolic. Doesn't work that way. Also, development of symbolization doesn't proceed only in the direction from left to right on that continuum. It's situational. If I were on a tour in Paris, I went with a tour group with a tour guide who spoke French. I don't speak any French. And I was with my group, and we were going to the Louvre to see the Mona Lisa. And as long as I'm with the group, I had my dictionary so I could look up a few words. And I'm with the guide who speaks English. I'm golden. I'm down here in symbolic. And if I lose my tour group, and because I didn't pay attention and stay with the group, and so I'm digging out my dictionary and I'm looking, I'm sliding down. Pardon me, I said that wrong. I said that totally backwards. Oh my goodness, I'm so sorry. I was way symbolic up here when I was with my guide, right? I was way down here. I said the wrong thing. It's not on my screen, I apologize. When I'm with the guide who's speaking French, I'm with the group, I'm very, very symbolic. And I start sliding toward a more concrete symbolic, when I have to use my own dictionary and I'm trying to pantomime and use charades about where's the big bus and where are the Americans, and they don't know. And then the museum starts to close and I'm getting more panicky. So, I go in the bathroom and then I am in such a hurry. I leave my purse and I leave my dictionary. And then I go outside, they kick me out and it's starting to get dark. And I'm sitting down on the curb and I start to cry. I'm very, very non-symbolic. I'm sitting on a curb in Paris crying in the dark because I have no way to communicate. So we go up and back and up and back according to context, according to partners that are familiar and unfamiliar. Wouldn't it be lovely if it just went this way and never slid? But it goes back and forth and back and forth. And we do that as adults who are facile in a language. So we talk about a learner's communication level by the descriptor where the majority of her skills fall on that continuum. Non-symbolic. Let's talk about non-symbolic. And as we talk about now, each of those 3 stages will give you some clues about what to look for, what to do, and I have a video to illustrate them for you. Learners do demonstrate skills at multiple points along that continuum, all right? Typically, they will demonstrate different skills with familiar partners and unfamiliar partners. Some of you who are teachers, therapists, worked on IEP teams, you might have talked with a family who will say, well, he talks to me at home. And in your mind, you're thinking, no, he doesn't. He doesn't talk at school. But you can't say that. That's not respectful. And it's not true, because for mom and dad, he does communicate with them at home by banging on the side of the TV. So you say, well, what can you give me an example? Say, well, he tells his brother when he wants to change channel on the TV. And then you probe, but you say, well, how does he do that? How does he tell his brother? And you learn, all right? Because if he's beaten on the side of something in your classroom, you don't know what that means if the family hasn't shared with you. So familiar and unfamiliar partners see different levels of ability on that continuum, and familiar and unfamiliar environments, home versus school versus an assembly, versus if you are sick and all your kids have to go to another classroom because your school can't get a sub. That's the world we live in. The kids aren't going to be familiar with that environment. Chances are they won't communicate as well in that unfamiliar environment, even if it's in the same school building. Other words for this non-symbolic stage. It's referred to as a primitive stage of communication. I don't like that, but it is in literature. Idiosyncratic, that means unique to the individual learner. I think that's appropriate. Pre-intentional, I think that's appropriate. The 3rd webinar we're going to do is about communicative intentionality. Stay tuned. And for those of you who studied language, communication, speech paths, this is the stage that is called perlocutionary. If you don't know what that term means, don't worry about it. Just focus on non-symbolic, you're good to go. I'm just trying to make the connections for people who might have heard that word. So again, some of this is repetitive, but it's really important. At the non-symbolic stage, signals are idiosyncratic. Responsibility for successful communication rests with the partner. You have to interpret the behavior correctly. When David was standing out on the playground by the tree, I had to interpret that he was saying to me, Susan, I love it when it's nice outside and there's a breeze and these leaves touch my face like this. I love it. I had to interpret that right. And it took me months to figure that out, okay? So the context was key, and I had to interpret it so that I could take it and use it in my classroom. Couldn't bring the tree in my classroom, but I could create simulations of that movement, that feeling, that sensation. And for kids who experience deafblindness, repeating or duplicating visual sensation and auditory sensation is very, very important. Examples, this is not comprehensive, but certain ways kids will cry, certain ways they'll posture their bodies. Sometimes kids do this, even kids who are typically developing do this if they lean over if they hurt. We do that sometimes, right? Hello. If my best friend were coming to meet me at the airport and I hadn't seen her for 18 months, I'm not going to walk up to her and say, well, hello, Baker. It's wonderful to see you. I'm glad you came to visit. I'm going to run and laugh and jump and hug. I'm going to use my non-symbolic forms to say, oh my gosh, I'm so glad you're here, right? So it's how kids act on people, how they act on objects, unconventional gestures. Non-symbolic is not conventional in the way they vocalize. An assumption that is pretty safe to make is that learners who are primarily non-symbolic communicators do communicate with an E. I really do know how to spell, people. I proved this. I am so embarrassed. I am so sorry. I saw one other spelling error, but I didn't point it out because I was too embarrassed, but this is ridiculous. They often use a majority, not just a few idiosyncratic forms. They use a majority of idiosyncratic non-conventional forms. So what do we do if kids do these unconventional, unpredictable, idiosyncratic things? How do we figure it out? Because it's up to us, the partners, to figure it out. You watch. Like I said, I had to watch David during any unstructured time. I watched him at unstructured time in the classroom, in the hallway, I watched him at unstructured time all the time. But the only thing that took me anywhere was outside on the playground. You observe, you make notes, what the kid does. You try to, he seems to kick his foot every time somebody walks by. He seems to cry every time he's near Susan. He seems to just stand with his eyes closed and be at peace when he's by the tree. Whatever you think you see, write it down. Talk to the other people on your team. Talk to the family. Families, talk to the team at school. Share what appears on the lists of 3, 4, 5 people. That's where you start, because that kid does those same things with familiar and unfamiliar people at home and at school. That's where you start. And you follow the learner's lead. And what you're going to do, those are potential communicative signals. If the learner's just doing them, when David's standing by the tree, he wasn't intentionally communicating with me. He was feeling satisfied that, oh man, this blowing on me and it feels so good and I love it. He wasn't trying to communicate with me. But that's a potential communicative signal because he was at peace and never hurt himself in that situation, in that context. So I'm going to take that potential signal and I'm going to embellish it like crazy to try to turn it into communication signal. And if everybody does it the same way at home and at school, it's a winner, right? And we're going to build a communication system for that learner. Often, non-symbolic skills must be directly taught. Often. So this is Mr. Lance. He's the study at the end. This is a video that's pretty short. At about 9 seconds in, he takes hold of my hands to keep them on his head. He loves for me to scratch his head. Love for me to scratch his head. So he takes my hands, but then he keeps his hands on my hands so I won't move them. There's a lot of noise in this video. It's not him. That doesn't have anything to do with it. It is all about my hands, and he wants me to scratch his head. That's very non-symbolic. How many kids do you know that take both of your hands and put them on their heads so you'll scratch their head? Not very many. It's an idiosyncratic, non-symbolic signal. So here we go. This game. Okay, get ready for it. There we go. Oh, do it some more. Oh, do it some more. Oh. And what I will tell you is if I ran this longer, eventually he takes his hands off of my head and he puts them down on my elbows and he bats my arms to say, keep going, Susan, keep going, keep going. But again, it's very idiosyncratic. It's very non-symbolic, very effective. That's where we started. This is a kid who uses a speech generating device now, responds to pictures, communicates in unbelievable ways. reads manual sign like an expert, but it started here. And I lost my arrow. So let's look at the next stage. The next stage is called transitional or concrete symbolic. A lot of things that start to emerge, and that's why I say these are really blurred lines, but as these things start to grow, object permanence, knowing that if I can't reach something, I can climb up, I can pretend to put the socks on my stuffed animal. It starts to move towards symbolic communication. Common sense kind of things. Like I say, kind of doing one of these to say hello or goodbye. Behaviors start to become intentional, not intentionally communicative, but kids do things on purpose. And again, in that speech path terminology, this is called illocutionary. So the characteristics of this concrete symbolic stage, the way that kids express, the signals they use to express become more conventional. They're still not 100% the way you and I communicate with each other. Partner is still important, but less so. Context is still important, but less so. Remember the arrows on the slides we looked at. And you begin to see tangible symbols. Again, if you're familiar with Charity Rowland's work on tangible symbols, these emerge at the transitional stage. 3D objects, if a child uses a calendar system, anticipation shelf, school teams might have talked to you families about this, or school teams do it where they put 3D objects, they put a piece of a backpack strap to say it's time to go home. They'll put a piece of plastic to say it's time to put on your AFOs, and kids will get that to help march them through their day as an object schedule. That is appropriate for a learner who's in the transitional stage, not meaningful for a child who's in the previous stage of non-symbolic. So examples of transitional forms: gestures, object representations, and acting on people. Kids slapping at you, pulling on your shirt to say, come over here, taking you by the hand over to the refrigerator to basically say, I would like some orange juice, please. Would you get it? Because that's conventional, but dragging you over to the refrigerator isn't conventional. That's not the way a fully symbolic communicator would express that message, right? So this will be a video of a little preschooler named Lily. This is during COVID time. So there's a lady on the left, Mary, who is her occupational therapist. Lily is on the right with her mama, and Lily's lying on the floor on her back and partly on mama's lap. And mama is doing the manual alphabet in Lily's hand. And up until she gets to about K, it just doesn't look like anything's registering at all. It seems very non-symbolic on Lily's part. But if you watch, when mama gets to K, Lily takes her hand more firmly. And then mama keeps going. And when mama gets to P, Lily nods her head. All right. Mama gets to T and Lily looks at mama. So we've got that exchange going on. She moves her hand at V, and at the end, mama does and Z and bops her on the nose, and Lily laughs because she's been able to predict it, because mama does it the same way every time. And because of this kind of mixture, that represents a transitional example. It shows growth from non-symbolic into transitional, and we're headed for symbolic. And it shows how through structured, repetitive, routine presentation, we're able to teach kids the world's predictable. If every single partner who presents the manual alphabet does it the same way with Lily. So here we go. Here's Lily and mama. Watch.
Oh. P.
See, she nod her head.
S.
Watch T.
I-N-C.
And you saw she was getting ready for it. She took mama's hand and she knew, she smiled, she could predict it. And this is the OT that helped mama figure this activity out. So it's a great, great, great one to illustrate, to illustrate the transitional stage. Symbolic, I do want to talk with you briefly about it. This is how you and I communicate with each other in this format, not how I was communicating in the dark outside the Louvre in France, which was not a true story. So it's lame, I get that. Abstract symbolic. Symbolic is the accepted practice for a native speaker in a language. It's very referential. At this point, the interaction is intentionally communicative. If you'll remember at transitional stage, I said behavior is intentional, but not necessarily intentionally communicative. At this stage, overt behaviors are intentionally communicative, and the third one in that triad of speech path words is locutionary. So in this stage, kids use very conventional expressions consistent with their culture, and consideration of the primary language. And I should probably also say, and the dialect, the regional dialect. If you'll remember from last time, we talked about that labels can be very confusing. And we talked about, do you say soda? Do you say pop? Do you say fountain drink? Do you say Coke? Do you say soda pop? So it's regional and dialectical as well as the primary language. By now, the partner's role is even smaller. Communication can occur free of context, as I asked you about your kitchen sink and last winter holiday. Samples of forms, speech, braille, print, manual sign, tactile sign, written words, all of the above. Cued speech, Tadoma, Makaton, whatever you want to say. So for this one, this is Miss Hannah. And Hannah, I guess I should have said, Lance, whom you met for non-symbolic, is a learner who has charge and has deafblindness. Lily, the little preschooler with her mom, has deafblindness. Hannah has charge syndrome and has a diagnosis of deafblindness as well. All right. So what she is very symbolic. She and her teacher of the deaf have built this replica of the school's playground. And Hannah is going to narrate it for you and what she and her friends do on the playground at school when they play with one another, okay? And Hannah, she does have some speech. Hannah's 10. But in this video, she doesn't use her speech. She uses manual sign to tell this story of the playground and what she and Sophia and her other friends do. But there is a voice. The interpreter voices what Hannah is signing. So the teacher of the deaf is interpreting for Hannah in this video.
On the swings is Hannah, and she's swinging and swinging, swinging and swinging, enjoying her time, along with a friend who's swinging and swinging with her. Finally, on the climbing structure is Sophia. She's climbed to the top like King Kong. She's looking all over to take over. The end.
The end. Do you think Hannah liked telling her story? She does. She's great. I guess I should tell you, Lance, the young man, he's from Missouri. Lily, the little blonde girl, is from Florida, and Hannah is from Iowa. And I've worked with their families, and they're so generous. They've given me permission to use these videos with you all today. So thanks to the kiddos and their families.
On the swing.
Whoops, sorry. So this is a summary form. If you like it, I could provide you with a copy, or you can take a screenshot out of here. This just puts on one slide in these columns how things moved from idiosyncratic to conventional across the continuum, how context changes, the partner's responsibility to the point that a learner is responsible for her own communication. The only thing on this sheet that makes me nervous, and it does make me nervous, Is this first row? I really didn't know if I wanted to put it on there or not, but when I talked about this topic before, people say, well, what ages, Susan? What ages? What ages? What ages? So it's on here, but please, these are just guideposts. And these represent the number of the ages of kids who are typically developing. So we're happening non-symbolic birth to 8 or 9 months. This is early communication. But as I say, many kids with deaf blindness, this non-symbolic stage extends way beyond. Lance didn't leave the non-symbolic stage till he was almost 5.5 years old. Some kids with deaf blindness will never leave this stage, and that's okay, as long as we build an effective system through which they can communicate. The transitional or concrete symbolic stage, people say 8 or 9 months to 12 or to 15 months, super short, 4 to 6 months at the most. And then from 1 year to 15 months for the rest of our lives. In most environments with most people, we are symbolic. If we go to a country where we don't speak the language, we slide back, right? But in our country or countries where English is the primary language, we basically rely on our symbolic forms. Unless we're in a country where they speak English and they use different phrases, we may slide back this way to say, what, the loo, what are you talking about? So we have to ask some questions, but we basically operate here from about 15 months on if we are typically developing. So how do we move kids on that continuum from non-symbolic to symbolic? How do we do it? We need to set up experiences for kids that involve movement, structured movement, predictable movement, action, predictable action, routine action. Every time I kick my foot, I'm going to come over, somebody's going to come over here and touch me on the shoulder and say, Susan, what? Or Susan, play, or whatever you're going to do. You build movement, you build action. One of the communication reminders from last time was earliest expression of memories involve movement and touch, right? There you go, movement and touch. If we're going to do sensory exploration, we often don't have good reads, reliable reports on exactly how and what learners see and hear, especially if they're very young or they don't have well-developed cognitive skills or communication skills to tell us what they see and hear. So we need to rely on touch. We need to provide interactions with objects, with activities, with people in context that the learner prefers. If the learner loves to go to the lake or a pond and you hate it, I would say suck it up and go to the lake, because that's what the learner likes. We have to do what the learner prefers because we've got to hook the learner to say, I hear you, I see you, come on, come out of your body, join me in the world. I know what you want. I'm going to try to help you get it. Play. Play is important. I don't care how old the kid is. Now we need age-appropriate play. You don't want to be playing with a baby doll with a 16-year-old young lady, but play. We like to play as adults. Play and implement routines. You can't necessarily implement regular routines for every single thing throughout the day, but for the things that always happen, you get off the bus and you go to your classroom. You get on the bus and go home. You have a meal together, a meal at school, a meal at home. You have a bedtime routine. Whatever those every day the same thing happens. Get regular routines. And above all, we need adults who are going to be responsive. If you'll remember, one of the communication reminders was be attuned to the learner. I had the picture of the adults that were talking to each other over their coffee and ignoring the kids, and with a big red, don't do this. Focus on the learner. If Lily's mom had not been watching her face as she went through the alphabet, she would have missed Lily's movement of her hand, Lily's eye contact with her, because it went by in a blink, right? And Lily's laugh, her mama would have missed it if she didn't focus on the learner and be attuned and respond to her. We have to be responsive as communication partners. The last thing we'll say generally about symbolic ability is we can talk about forms of communication or modes of communication as these look at the non-symbolic, transitional, concrete symbolic, and abstract symbolic points. Again, it's understanding that one thing stands for something else. One thing represents something else. And we can put them in the category of vocal things, unaided things, and aided things. And I've made another chart so that we have the 3 stages. Again, these lines are just to make the chart clear, but there's not, you're here and then boop, you're here, and then boop, you're here. It doesn't work that way. It's a sliding thing from non-symbolic, hopefully this direction, right? So vocal, what it looks like here, what it looks like here, what it looks like here. Vocal just means there's some kind of sound coming out. It could be screaming. That's vocal communication. Crying, grunting, groaning, to kids going, and you've heard kids do this. They'll go, I hum, huh. And you, no, huh. You don't know what the heck they're saying, but you know they're saying something, which is much more meaningful than if they're just screaming at you down here, right? To traditional speech. Or kids babble with their hands. If they watch other people, they're trying to do things like this with their hands when their parents might be signing more drink or something, and kids are doing, they're babbling with their hands. I have very sophisticated definitions for unaided and aided. Unaided simply means this does not involve anything beyond the scope of the learner's own body. The learner uses his own body as a communication signal or a communication act by changing how alert, his affect, posture, movement, all the way up to signing in ASL, tactile signing, finger spelling, whatever. It doesn't involve any stuff outside the learner's body. So you know where I'm going. With aided communication forms involve stuff outside the learner's body. And it's, you think, Susan, you're being, no, that's true. This is sound, no stuff, just the learner's body, stuff, okay? Acting on people, acting on objects, using textures, tangible symbols, all the way up to Braille, traditional writing, okay? So again, these are just examples. These aren't comprehensive. These aren't exhaustive. We are close to an hour. We're not quite there, about 3 minutes away. I am going to use the last 6 or 7 slides to give you a real quick case example. The basic presentation of symbolization development is concluded, but I hope you'll hang with me to learn about Mr. Lance, the little guy who loved me to scratch his head. So we'll see if we can wind this up in just a few minutes. Here he was, just 1 year before he wanted me to scratch his head. This is when I very first met him in 2004, 18 years ago. I know it was a long time. He was a participant in a research study I did, and to qualify for that research study on a battery of tests, kids had to show they were not symbolic in their communication. We did a whole bunch of different evaluations, and he was not symbolic in any way, shape, or form, but he sure was cute, right? He's darling. Since he's been in 4 or 5 different research studies that I've done, here he was in 2019 when he graduated from a public high school in Kansas City, Missouri. So this is he. And it was a really cool thing to go to his high school graduation. He was totally not symbolic here. And boy, is he a symbolic communicator now, which says, meet him where he was. This is from his mom, and I'm only going to read the first part. You can pause the video if you want to read the whole thing. His mama says, it does not matter how similar or different we are from each other. Communication occurs in a variety of modalities. We need to be respectful of the different communication styles. We all have something to offer. And she goes on to say, you know, he can't maybe be totally independent, but he helps. He's responsible for getting his own food, for his tube feeding. He's responsible for his own seat belt. He's responsible for a lot of things. And that kind of expectation, oh, did we say that as a communication reminder? Yes, expect a learner to communicate. Mom, dad, and the whole family grew right along with Lance throughout these studies. So to tell you, when I first started with Lance, he only had 3 forms that he communicated. He cried, but he didn't make sound because he has a trach. He pushed things away, and he threw things. That was the only expressive behavior that anybody could figure out. And by the end of the study and his rates of growth, we were teaching gestures. That was our study, to see if we could teach meaningful gestures, that kind of transitional stage, to kids who experience deafblindness. He had learned a total of 9 new gestures to fulfill a dozen functions, reasons why he communicated. He was amazing. This was over the course of 8 or 9 months. He learned so many things. And his teacher, was in an adaptive art class at the high school in Kansas City. And the pictures you're going to see in a minute had been on display in the school library. So one day I visited 3 days in a row at his high school in Kansas City. This is when I was living in North Carolina. And I got to visit there and see him again. And they were taking the class to the library. And the way they told me the story was they were going to take down the art from the library, and they were going to take it to the location where there was going to be a school-wide art fair, right? But nobody told Lance that. And he's deaf and he's blind, and his vision is very limited, lower quadrant, primarily this one quadrant over here on the right. He has a cochlear implant. He gets some sound, but we don't know how much. Nobody attempted to explain it to him in sign. He reads sign, but nobody signed to him. And he's in this library watching these people take down his pictures. And my point was, even though now he does have a speech generating device and he can use that, he doesn't use it very often. He continues to resort to his use of gestures that he learned in that study 17, 18 years ago, especially when people don't tell him what's going on. He uses his gestures. And these are his 2 pictures that had been mounted on the wall in the library. This is a portrait of him that his art teacher painted, which is pretty cool. This is a picture that Lance had made. Now it's obviously upside down and this is sideways. But the paras in the class took these off this wall where they had been taped up and put them in a pile on the library floor. And Lance shuffled over, found each one of them, put them back, and propped them on this wall. And a second time, the paras went and they took these pictures down and they put them in the pile on the floor. And he doesn't know. Nobody's told him, they're going to be in the show. They're going to be in the school show. They didn't tell him anything. And so he's going to go gestural, right? And he dug those pictures out. He has very limited motor skills. You can see he's got the sloping shoulders, typical of charge syndrome. And he dug those out and he put them up there. Granted, this one's sideways, this one's upside down, but I could just see the wheels turning in his head. Folks, you really don't get it. I want my pictures to stay here, right? That's what he's screaming at them by this behavior. We have to respond to these kinds of things. I think his story really does illustrate how critical non-symbolic development is, how critical gestural communication development is to predict language outcomes and to bridge kids to symbolic communication. I cannot tell you that if he had not been in the gestural study and we hadn't tried to teach him all those gestures, that he would not be a symbolic communicator. I can't tell you that. I can tell you with complete confidence, I truly believe in my heart that that study and what he learned in that study is still at the core of what helped move him along. I used to wear an identifier, a big band watch, and every time I would meet him 2004, the cute little guy in the orange shirt. I would take his hand and put it on my watch and say, "This is Susan," and then would say hi by a high five. Well, the first day I went to his high school, it was the first hour class was adaptive PE, and I felt like a stalker because I was watching him, but I knew he didn't know I was there because he couldn't see me. So finally, when the structured class was over, I went up. He was helping put the equipment away, and he's pokier than can be. He's the little guy that I talked about last time that has a 23-second response time, delayed response time. So he's slow. And I asked the teacher if I could talk to him because I wanted him to know I was there watching him. And she said, sure. So I went over to him and I had that watch, didn't work anymore, but I wore that watch. And I took his hand and I said, "Hi, Lance, it's Susan." And the moment his hand, this is Lance's hand, this is my watch. The moment it hit that, he went, and he stuck his hand up. It was like boom, and he went. He remembered, and I hadn't seen him for almost 8 years. 8 years. And he remembered me from that object symbol and that structure of that gesture. That helped him so much. Is it totally responsible? No, but it helped him so, so much. So please focus on non-symbolic communication. Please focus on gestures. I think his story exemplifies one other communication reminder, and with this we'll stop, that kids with deaf blindness often utilize different communication modes for receptive and expressive purposes. His primary mode of expression is still gesture. He does use the speech output device with touch chat. Sometimes, usually has to be prompted, but the way he receives information is almost, no, I can't say that, is heavily, probably 90% by manual sign. His teachers, his para, his parents, his brothers and sisters, they all sign to him. He has only, according to his mom, I don't know, according to his mom, he only signed twice. He signed nurse when he was in really bad pain, and he signed when his PEG, his G-tube came out. He does not sign, but he takes information in through sign, and he expresses through gestures and sometimes the use of his touch chat. So I hope that that story might inspire you to say, I need to work on gestures. I need to focus on non-symbolic communication. It's really important. All those behavioral things kids do are potentially communicative. So with that, here is my email. Here's my phone number. I'd love to hear from you. Stay tuned. Part 3 regarding intentionality of communication is coming. And I sincerely thank you for your time today. And I wish you well. Thank you so much. Thanks, Dr. McKittrick. Bye.